educated, successful people like all of us in this room. So first of all, does India still matter? And I remember in 2011, I was beginning to do my first interview and I was talking to the CEO of AstraZeneca. Okay? He said, I know I've been asked to speak to you because you know my chairman, but you know what? I really don't like India. And this was about 5 minutes into the interview, so I said, oh my God, what am I going to do for the rest of the time? So I said, oh, why do you dislike India so much? He said, it's the worst place in the world for a pharmaceutical company. You guys have price controls, you don't have patent protection, you have all these copycat guys, you do compulsory licensing. This is just terrible. We prefer Indonesia, we prefer Philippines, we much prefer China. And as I went around talking to CEOs and leaders around the world, there were different versions of this, right? So you saw that the economy was really, really slowing down. You had harassment by the tax authorities against all companies, but multinationals are, better targets because they don't have any political support, and it's pretty good cows to milk. Corruption. India was becoming more and more famous for corruption and then eventually rape than for anything else, and so on. And so Indian companies themselves were complaining loudly. You had Ratan Tata talk about India becoming a banana republic. You had Sunil Mittal, you had Baba Kalyani say, I'd rather invest outside than India. And of course, global CEOs were also saying the same thing. My shareholders, my board asking me, what's wrong with you? Why would you want to go to India? And this was this large sentiment. So I spent the first 2 chapters of my book actually talking about why does India really matter, and not from a nationalistic standpoint, and not stupid things like demographic dividend, okay? Economic terms, why as a global company can you not afford to ignore India? And the first argument is very simple. It's just the size of the economy, right? It is a $2 trillion economy. $2 trillion economy. That even if it grows only 6%, it's substantial. Where else was there growth? Okay. Then you look at the demographics and the middle class consumption story. Even in a 6% GDP growth scenario, where is the growth in consumption going to come from? The largest is India. China is second largest. And that's just because of numbers and a steady growth in income and affluence. So if the government is not able to achieve anything more than this is still a sizable opportunity for a company. Okay? The second sort of related point to the economy is, I try to explain to you guys, don't even begin comparing us to China. The models are fundamentally different, not comparable. Okay? In China, the growth happened because of the government. In India, it happens despite the government. And that's right. And Gulcharan Das wrote that book with a nice title that says, it happens when the government sleeps. But I said, this is not a bad thing. Okay? And I say, when I get really depressed, I look at this graph. And why is it so exciting and energizing? Because if you see, since 1950, we've had some spectacularly bad leadership with really bad ideas on how to run the economy. Yet India has steadily moved forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step forward, and has continued to bumble along. Okay? That means it's unlikely that even a really bad government can completely destroy the growth story. Okay? And occasionally we get it right. So of course other countries which started at the same levels have done much better. Korea, Singapore, China certainly. So we could have done much better. But the chances are we're going to continue to find a way to move forward. And this is the really important thing. I said there is this illusion that growth and development happens in a steady way. It doesn't happen that way. It happens that way only in your own delusions. What happens in any country, especially in India, and it's the same in most, is in every decade or 10 years, you have 3 or 4 good years, sandwiched between 6, 7 mediocre years or bad years. And that's what we've seen. Okay? So if you see the last 30 years of India's development, you have these windows of opportunity. Okay? We had that fantastic period between 2004 and 2010. 6 good years. Now it looks like we may be at the cusp of another window of 5 or 6 years of good economic growth. Now, from a company standpoint, what you have to do is, just show up. When these windows happen, run really fast. When bad times come, just do nothing, just survive. And if you do that for 10, 20 years, you're at the end of at the head of the pack. If you give up every time things get difficult, you end up going nowhere. And that's the difference. So you see what has happened in retail. It's been a very difficult time because of the policy issues on retail. So Carrefour says, forget it, we're packing up our bags and going home. Walmart retreated, ended their JV, said we'll probably be back. But meanwhile, this German company called Metro, they've steadily built their business. Now they have their stores in India at global levels of profitability. They just announced they're going to open 40 more stores. Okay? So the companies that don't give up and steadily go ahead are the ones that do well. If you think, here we know Cummins, for instance. Cummins entered in Pune in 1962. They had many tough patches, but the company never gave up. And that's why today its presence in India is so substantial. So I think this is a really important point. And most of all, the question I raise for now is, could India be the next China? And the reason I say this is very simple. People are getting really nervous about China. Okay? You've got an economy that's slowing down. You have wage costs that are going pretty high. You have a government and a nation that is feeling more insecure and beginning to attack foreign companies. So you see the very systematic crackdown against all global companies that are successful. Okay? They've had good reason to act on them, but the point is there's been very tough action against lots of global companies. The geopolitical tensions building up, so Japanese companies in particular are extremely nervous. The US is worried, cyber issues and intellectual property theft is a big deal. So overall, most companies want to reduce their dependence on China and de-risk it. But where do you go? How do you substitute something that's the size of China? How many other countries are there? So the natural one with the same size and potential is only India. And so that's my point. Could it be India? And it turns out that you actually don't have to do too much to make India, really a good place and the floodgates to open. I wrote a piece in the Economic Times about 3 weeks ago. It's, you might want to look at it. But India is rated number 134 out of 180 countries by the World Bank in terms of ease of doing business. Just to calibrate you, here are two countries that we are behind: Pakistan and Yemen. And the reason I use Pakistan and Yemen is these are two countries where the CIA drones are circling, hunting terrorists. And yet, from a point of view of doing business, they're easier than India. So if this Modi government can take that 134 and bring it to just say 99, okay, double digits. China is at 90, okay, so it's not necessarily an easy place to do business, just easier. You would see the floodgates open in terms of FDI coming in, okay. So you do that, you stop the tax harassment, okay, you improve infrastructure a little bit. I think India could begin to take its place besides China, particularly from a manufacturing standpoint. Okay? And so this is the argument number one for why I think India still matters. It matters even if nothing happens, and if this government actually does some of what it's saying it's going to do, this could be a really phenomenal place. The second argument why I say India matters is precisely because of the chaos. I use the word chaos in my book as shorthand for everything that makes life difficult, right? Babus, corruption, no infrastructure, you don't know what the policy is going to be, when it's going to be changed, whether the law will be retroactively amended 25 years, whatever, all these things. And my only point is this definitely applies to India, but it's a defining feature of every emerging market. Okay? That's why they're called emerging markets. They're difficult. Okay? So, here's a good example of this. This is the world corruption map. Okay, the darker the red, the more corrupt it is. And what you immediately notice is, there's some parts of the world which, are not so corrupt. North America, Western Europe, Australia,